everyone. Like Ryan, he mentioned, then my name is Thomas Ladefoged, that is. Good. And I have the pleasure and honor of being CEO of Pixelz. And what I'll be talking to you about today is creativity at scale with flow. Because it is so that the whole flow concept of flow, how many are familiar with the batch versus flow concepts of production? Is that like a term? Yeah, some of you are. Good. But that's what I'll be talking about. Just one thing. I'm based in Copenhagen in Denmark. So English is not my mother tongue. And I tend to, when I get nervous, then I kind of start shifting to dansk. And if that happens, så må I lige sige til, fordi så får I ikke så meget ud af det. Okay? Good. All right. First of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Denmark. It's a crazy little country. About 6 million people in total, so like half of the number of people who lives in the metro area of Los Angeles. So it's not very big. And we, despite the fact that we pay the highest taxes in the world, okay, like 50+%, it's insane. We are still, when they do those surveys to find the most happy people in the world, we're typically in the top 3. So I guess you can actually be happy and pay a lot of tax somehow or the other. But Denmark is also a small country, and basically the only resources, natural resources we have is some land where we can do some agricultural work. But apart from that, all we do and all we have is who we are and the minds and our brains. So what is a central thing of many things that are produced in Denmark, comes out of Denmark, that is something to do with design creativity. It's like an integrated part of a lot of the products that we sell that come out of Denmark. But of course, when you sell products like that, you need to find out how do you scale a creative process, right? So that you can actually be efficient and spend your time where it matters for the end product. And here I'll start talking about this guy. This is Henry Ford, this guy here. And he had an idea back in around 1910. He wanted to disrupt the concept of personal transportation. So he invented this little thing with 4 wheels. It's called a car. Most of you are familiar with it today. And in the beginning, it was very easy to produce that thing for him, because he hired one team of people, and then they got all the things they needed for the car, and then they would build that one car. But he was very successful with those cars, so Ford started to develop more different versions of this car. Right? So all of a sudden he had a lot of teams that were building these cars, and that complicated his production quite a bit, because all of these teams, they were trained in building one model, but what if they sold another model? And he needed to completely use his creativity to disrupt how he produced the car. So what he did back in 1913 was he invented what is called the assembly line. And the assembly line is actually the first industrial version of flow production. What he did with this was he cut the whole process of building a car into a lot of small steps. The first assembly line he did had 84 steps, and they produced a car before the assembly line in 12 hours. After the assembly line, they produced a 4T in 1 hour and 33 minutes. And on top of that, this guy here, before he was working on a team where he did a little bit of everything on that car. All of a sudden, he was only mounting whatever he's mounting there, and that's all he did. So the quality of what he did increased dramatically as well, and so did the efficiency. So just to show you a little about what are the differences between batching and flowing, I'll show you this little video here. This is batching. You see what he does here is he finishes that process that he's doing, and he does it as good as he can, and then when he's done, he'll pass it on to the next process, and then he will do whatever he needs to do. And when he's done with everything there, in this example, they're done, but then he would pass it on. And this is exceptionally inefficient. Very, very inefficient. Also, he's trained to do what he does, and he's trained to do what he does. They can't overlap, so there's no like, they can't do any load balancing. If we look at that, what happens when you do flow production, he finishes one, he passes it on, right? Boom, 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 boom. And all of a sudden, that whole process, they do the exact same thing as before, but the time is cut like down to like a third of what it was before, and it is extremely, extremely efficient. So that's the concept of flow production. So what Henry Ford, he did, he said, okay, let's look at the machine that builds the machine. That was like his thinking behind all of this. And that has evolved over the years. And today, if you look at the car manufacturing industry, then this is a video from a gigafactory building a Tesla Model 3. And these are now known to be probably the most efficient flow production lines that we have today. And what they've done is they've added, of course, compared to what Henry Ford did, a ton of technology. And then also he's added, but he's kept the human in interaction with some of this, because humans can still do things that machines cannot do. So there are still things that we do better than machines, and that's why they run these hybrid models when they do production, big scale. So what Elon Musk, he said, the true problem, the true difficulty, and where the greatest potential is building the machine that makes the machine. In other words, it's building the factory. I'm really thinking of the factory like a product. It's pretty interesting. He's actually considering the whole value chain to be a very, very integrated of his end product. And why? And why is that interesting to us as well? Because the less time we can actually we can spend on the machine, you could say, or the processes leading up to the final product, the more resources we can put into doing the actual product, meaning the creativity, because that's where the difference is really made. Right? So it's about using your efforts where they make the biggest difference. But this whole concept of flow, why would you want to do it? Well, first of all, when you chop a process down like Henry Ford did, like they done at the gigafactories, there's an extremely high level of consistency. Another thing is that the speed increases dramatically when you move from batching into flow production. The third thing is that what people do, they are specialized in doing that, so quality increases as well. And the next thing is you're actually, you're trained at a certain thing, a certain step, but you can't be trained in more processes, meaning that you can load balance. And that means that you can scale up and down to a degree that you cannot do when you're batching. So there's a ton of advantages to it. And then you can, of course, say, now we're talking cost, but can you actually scale creativity? This is a picture of a restaurant in Copenhagen. This restaurant is called Noma. It is, for 5 years, it's been elected as the best restaurant in the world. And they're closing down now. But before that, if you wanted to book a table, 3 years or so waiting time. But this is what they serve on their plate is art. And when they do their kitchen layout, everything is ordered, is put up in a way where everyone are specialized, 100% specialized on that exact little part of a certain course. You won't by accident see a dessert chef all of a sudden cooking whatever, something else. No. They are 100% specialized. So they do flow to the extreme because they have a crazy focus on when you get that plate in front of you at the table. Food is fresh and hot and everything else. So an extreme focus on that flow production. And then, of course, at the end, they need to batch it, right? Because everyone by the table needs to eat at the same time. But how do you get started if you want to move into flow production? Well, first of all, there's a 4-step process to how you do this. If you want to move from batching into flow, the first thing you need to do is you need to map your processes. And mapping your processes meaning that you need to know every little detail of what you're doing. And you need to map it out. And you need to also understand the all the processes that lead up to the processes that you're in charge of, and whatever where you're delivering the product to, you need to understand that as well. So you help the processes before and the processes after to become efficient as well. And then you need to eliminate waste. Cut out the waste. Cut out the bottlenecks. So when you have that map, you need to take a look at what actually works there, and where's value created. Where there's no value created, cut it away. So finding the waste is you need to have that full overview of the process. You need to take a look at, can processes be made redundant or automated? Can you use technology to make some processes redundant? Do you know exactly where your time is spent? Do employees have the right skills and the right competences? Or can you actually increase quality if you specialize people some more? So specialization is the next thing. When you have that whole process chopped up and you have all these different steps, then you specialize and you become the very best at what you do. Because if one person builds a whole car, I guarantee you, he will not be mounting certain parts of that car to the same quality and as consistent if you have someone doing only that one thing. So optimize for quality, specialize. The next thing is then automate. Automate. Processes that can be redundant, do it. And if you can add technology to your processes, do it. And eliminate processes, right? Good. So those are the 4 steps. And if we look at a bit about how we did it at Pixelz, I can tell you what actually led us to this whole process of doing flow production. This is how we did it back in the days. We're talking 2017, 18 or so. And this is how it looks today. Well, back then, we handled approximately 20,000 images, assets in a 24-hour run. And we had 800 people to do that. That's not really running a retouching company. That's actually running an HR company. Because if you have just a 10% turnover, you're hiring like crazy. And it is extremely difficult to handle. And we had 3 founders back then. They said, hey, if this is how we're going to do it, we're closing this company. I had no dream of becoming HR director of a company of 800 retouchers. So they sat down and they completely rethought how everything was done. They wanted to disrupt the way retouching was actually done, and they wanted to create a pure technology-driven retouching company. So today, we're handling more than double the amount of assets with like half of the employees. On top of that, turnaround time and flexibility and first-time approvals and all of that is like way better than they were back then. So it has had an enormous impact on us. The first thing we did was we started asking a ton of questions about our process. You see, we have one limitation. You guys are familiar with the concept of Photoshop, right? Yep. Photoshop is a fantastic tool. You have an application for one person who receives one image and does everything from A to Z. Now, what is that? That is a pure definition of batching, right? So all we could do back in the days was buy a shitload of Photoshop licenses, right? And that's not efficient. It's killing efficiency. So what we did was we asked a lot of questions to actually understand the process. So now we took that whole process of retouching, and I know it sounds insane, but we took that process of retouching an image and split it into 200 different steps. Right? Insane. Why would you do that? You have Photoshop. That will fix it all. But that's what we did. And then today, an image goes through 10, 12 processes, and then it's done 100% and a lot better than it was back in the days. So you can see here, We had all those processes, and we know exactly where value is created, and we know exactly what we can cut out. And that's also when you have all these small processes. The smaller the processes you have, the easier it is to automate. Right? A big old process that you barely have full control over is impossible to automate. But if you chop it up in small pieces, it becomes much easier to find a piece of software that can help you, or to develop a piece of software. And that's what we've done over the coming years. So right now, we're approximately 68% or so of everything we do is done by computers, which is a huge game changer. Of course, also the last couple of years, a lot of AI is used, right? It's like a buzzword, but listen, it's good and it's nice to have AI and stuff like that. But you need to be in full control of your processes and everything that's going on before you can even start thinking about it. But that's what we've done, and that's why we cut out all of those manual processes. Good. So what we did is we went through these 4 steps. It took us some years, some million US to invest in a whole platform, because the platform we were provided was Photoshop, and we couldn't use it. So we had to build our own, and that's what we've done. We've basically built a digital assembly line for handling, images, video, whatever, assets to be used for online e-commerce purposes. And where we are right now is down here, continuous improvement. And we've done this intensely for years, and we actually still hire external people to come in and help us do this. But what can this mean for a photo studio? Can you actually do this? Well, we did a test in Europe with a group called Bestseller Group. And many of you are probably not familiar with it. It's like a $5 billion US company, 16 brands across 70 countries, 18,000 employees. So it's pretty massive. They went through a whole process of identifying, and mapping out their processes, getting in the right tools to support their workflow, getting in the right providers, and getting all the integrations up and running. And they cut their lead time, shut to site by 80% in the 3rd week after implementing these things. So it can have a massive, massive impact in a photo studio. And you guys are lucky. In Bestseller, we were involved in that, but Creative Force was involved in that as well. And you guys are lucky as photo studios, because there are actually software out there and applications that is built to help you optimize these processes. Unfortunately, we had to do it ourselves. That took time. Good. So again, the right questions. Full overview of processes. Where is value created? Ditch everything else. Try to make it redundant. Where are the bottlenecks, and where do we have idle time, and kill it? Can we increase specialization and thereby increase quality? And can we find ways to simplify the process? And which processes can be automated or supported with tech solutions? And here you need to think like an IT company. What's the difference between a technology company and production company? If a production company has a problem, they hire resources to minimize the problem. A technology company finds tech solutions to eliminate the problem. And that's how you need to think, because that's how you optimize processes using technology. Good? Cool? Done. Hello, Ryan.
Hello, Thomas.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
All right, so anyone have any questions for us? Yes, we do. And actually, I'm going to just read from up here. All right, Thomas. Other than efficiency, is there other wins from flow?
Yes, there's quite a bit. First of all, the specialization of people, right? I've been around that. That means that we have, you need to imagine, we have like a list of like 200 different steps. And right next to that, we have an online training program. We train every editor specifically towards those steps, meaning that we can increase speed and at the same time increase quality. So quality and speed are two of the most important things that we've gained from it. But of course, I mean, overall, the efficiency. I mean, doing twice as much work with half the amount of people than what we did 5 years ago is the big game changer. And then we also have customers who benefit quite a bit from this, because if we have certain customers where we do that does actual flow production, meaning when a photo is taken and selected, boom, it's uploaded, it's queued in our production. And within 2 hours, a fully retouched image is returned. That does tremendous to their workflow. So there's a lot of benefit of that, and there's a lot of money in it. Time is money.
Yeah, no, one of the things whenever I first learned about our process was it's also the time to value for our editors. If they specialize, and they get up to being able to execute on images a lot faster than if we have to teach them the whole process of finishing
Absolutely.
up an image.
Yes.
Does flow model take a toll on worker motivation?
I think we're trying to avoid it. Is that a good question or a good answer? I don't know if it is, but we are. But you see, like you said before, right? We don't necessarily, for all the steps, we don't need fully educated editors, right? Yep. So we can actually take people in, and then we make like a career path for them where they actually get to do more and more advanced steps. And when they do more advanced steps, they make more money as well. So we actually create a career path there. And then when they get really good at what they do, then we of course have the editorial, the video, and all of that stuff, and then we can move them on to other departments. But you need to think like that, because of course, instead of doing everything to an image, imagine all you're doing is skin retouching, just to take an example, right? You become the best in the world at skin retouching, I can guarantee you. But if that's all you do, 8 hours a day, 250 days a year, you might get a little bored doing skin retouching. So it's something that we are constantly considering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in essence, the skills creates a curriculum for them, and they can get up to speed really quickly on something and start to get to work, and then keep going with that and getting more advanced as they go.
Yeah. Exactly.
How do you handle retouching markups and revisions with flow?
Dun, dun, dun. How do we do that? That is done. What we have. One of the things that we spent some years developing is that whole platform that we use. Mm-hmm. And within that platform, you make all your comments to what needs to be done to the images. And that is following the images along with the different processes. And if we, for instance, have a certain customer who wants skin retouching done in a very specific way, and of course they do, then when that editor needs to do that skin retouching, that step, some examples from that specific customer will pop up, so he has something to align up against. Mm-hmm. So that's how we do that.
Yeah, and I think it's important.
No Skype or Slack or whatever other crazy channels to like handle digital post-it notes. Everything's done in the platform and following a particular image.
Yeah, I think it's important for those that aren't aware. We work in a templatized manner. True. And basically create these workflows, because especially in e-com, the needs tend to be the same needs over and over again, because they want clients want consistency on those images. Yeah. And so that's the way that we handle it. The markups are actually built into the templates, and those images travel with the templates through our system.
Yes.
How streamlined is the process from post-production to delivery to e-commerce partners?
Different. Yeah. We have certain customers that when we're done retouching, it goes directly to their website. No QC, no nothing, directly on the website. And we're comfortable doing that. I think that our first time approval rate these days is something like 99.4% or something in average. Mm-hmm. So there's very, very few rejections. So many customers are doing that in order to cut down turnaround time and get online faster. But of course, others have a different process. It depends on what kind of system they use. And some wants to do internal QC, fine, then we do that. It's very different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there a possibility of 100% automation?
Yes, if you can live with a 90% quality. We did a flow event in, I think it was in New York, where we had our head of R&D in Vietnam, a French guy, a PhD. He showed two images, right? A perfect image and then an image where if you counted the pixels, 98% of the pixels were right. And you would typically say a picture where the pixels are 98% correct, that's pretty good. But the fact is, when you look at that picture, it looks terrible. You cannot use it. So getting those last small bits and pieces, and especially because what you guys, most of you work with, and what we do for 95% of our business is fashion. I mean, you want it to be, you don't want a missing finger or a missing arm or whatever, right? But if you do nuts and bolts for do-it-yourself catalogs and stuff like that, it's a different ballgame. It's much easier to automate. But we're just challenged in the industry that we're in because we typically have a much higher expectation towards quality and so on.
Mm-hmm. To expand on the bestseller example, can you break down exactly how bestseller cut their lead time down using flow production?
Maybe I actually do. I have a colleague here who's better at answering that. Jakob, you've actually done a talk on this, have you not?
Nope. Yes, he has.
Yeah. 3 years ago. Yeah. Yeah. I think what Bestseller did was, with assistance from the different partners that they chose, we did together with them a whole lot of mapping. We spent a ton of time mapping out processes. And then we found out, okay, how's it done today? What actually creates value? And what kind of things, what processes can we actually cut out? For instance, back in the days, they were batching. When they, at the end of the day, they would send all their images to us for retouching. Boof. And then when we were done, we would return them in flow. But when someone showed up at work, that person would start QCing the images. So meaning that person would actually batch what we flow delivered. So we took a lot of those processes and said, how do we change this? And then with the user created force, they went into a complete flow setup. So every time an image is taken, selected, it's automatically, it's moved on to post. And what then happens when we're done with it, it's moved automatically. For some brands, I think, to QC, other brands directly to site. So we cut out some of those processes that doesn't make any sense, but it takes up a lot of time and a lot of people, right? So they could actually invest more in the creative part of what they did, which is why the studio is actually there, right? I mean, what company runs a photo studio to do QC on external partners? What value does that create? Right? That's because you have the wrong partners or the wrong setup or whatever. Doesn't. So remove that, make it redundant, and invest in the product that you're actually doing where you're making a difference. So that whole process was mapped out, and the workflow solution was implemented. We made the integrations between Pixelz and Creative Force that was needed, and that way we created a lot of seamless processes that were previously handled by people and in a batch process. And we moved it all into flow. It's not done like this. It takes some time, and the implementation of some of these things can be quite demanding. And there's also a change management process that goes on when you need to that dramatically change the whole way you're thinking about production and a way how you run your studio.
All right. Do workers in the process pipeline ever go rogue? How do you handle this?
Go rogue? I need my Google Translate now into Danish.
Just kind of go off on their own, doing their own thing. I'm kind of feeling like they're asking about me, Thomas. I don't know. No, go off and do their own thing. Like if we're, our process is very defined.
Yeah, no, I mean, they don't. We stick to processes. And also the way we handle things, we have both. I mean, we have some internal QC, and of course, we have certain customers that does QC as well. And I mean, if we're not delivering up to standard, there's something that happens with page release editors and so on and so forth. So they're very, very. I mean, we're extremely focused on keeping the standards. But that being said, there's a difference between how we handle, pretty simple images for your PDP or elevated or editorial, right? It's different processes, right? And there are different limitations or expectations to how they are allowed to go rogue.
Yep.
Yeah. Does that answer the question? Anonymous. Good.
All right. What process was the most difficult to automate and solve with technology?
The absolutely biggest challenge we had by far was in the beginning of 2019. Our automation rate was, if I remember correct, 17.6%. But we had amazing tech. But we'd forgotten one thing: change management and implementation. So we focused actually for almost a year. We actually said, try to hold back on developing new things. We need to implement what we've got. And just implementing what we had actually took our automation rate within a year from like 17% to, I believe, 52% or something like that. So that whole change management process of actually implementing those software and those technological solutions, that was by far the biggest challenge. Also remember, we have 3 different processes at Pixelz. We have those that are 100% automated. Then we have the ones that are 100% manual. And then we have the hybrid steps where humans are supported by technology. So there's a lot of training, a lot of implementation and change management to be handled, because you have a habit. Listen, you've been doing this for years. You know exactly how to do it. And then all of a sudden you need to do it in a different way. That takes time. And it takes a continuous effort, management-wise, to train and keep focus and motivate and so on and so forth. That is by far the biggest challenge we have.
That really is a different approach, and communicating it is
super different. Yeah.
How do you move large files efficiently through the many processes in the flow, especially with remote workers relying on internet connectivity?
That's a pretty good question, because that is a challenge. What we've done when we developed the system is some of those steps are done 100% in a browser, where we actually don't need to transfer the actual file. And then, of course, it is an ongoing battle for us to minimize what we call upload and download time, because it is a challenge, especially if you imagine this big old online assembly line, right, running through with 40,000 images a day, right, and each image has to go through, let's say, 12 different steps. Whew. You're talking about 500,000 different steps every single day. Each step has a number of operations. So we're talking like probably somewhere between 3 and 4 million operations daily. That needs to be handled on this online assembly line. During COVID, within 48 hours, all of our locations shut down. And we needed to, instead of distribute to different computers at the office, we needed to distribute the files to people's private addresses. We could do it, but I tell you, we were dependent on internet speed, and it slowed down our processes a lot. So it is a challenge for us, and it also means that we have a provider. We have our main location in Hanoi in Vietnam, and we have a provider in Bangladesh, and there are only certain things that we can have them do in Bangladesh, because we cannot transfer that amount of files with the file size we're talking about. So it has some limitations. True.
Is there a process with Flow to color correct product to product on hand?
Yes. That's I think we're talking color matching here, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And that is, that's a thing that's built. That's a step within the process that is, to a very large extent, automated based on like a certain reference. And then we color match, across products like, well, that's our bread and butter. Mm-hmm. But it is handled, again, there's technology behind it. And that helps quite a bit.
Have you seen the successful implementation of flow process philosophy without the aid of a process engineer or expert?
We actually did it without, because we kind of built the platform along the way. Jacob is nodding his head and smiling. Should we maybe in the beginning, if we had actually understood the magnitude of how we were disrupting the way we were working ourselves, if we'd actually understood that in the beginning, should we had hired like some kind of engineer that had that like knew everything about flow production and production philosophy and methodology and so on, we probably should. We probably should have. We could probably have saved some cost. And we could have squeezed the implementation process. I'm certain about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Because based on the, based on the experience we gain, we're working with approximately 2,000 different customers. And there's just so much information and knowledge to be gained. So you have a pretty good idea, to say the least, about best practices, right? And if we look at the ones that we work with the most is the Creative Force guys. And many of them, they've actually been running photo studios themselves. That's their whole background. And for years, so they know exactly what they're talking about. And you need, and quite seriously, you need that kind of competence to help you during the implementation. It's you can't just download a piece of software and then think, hey, woo. It's a process, and it takes time, and it's complicated. Yep.
Does that answer it? Yeah. Awesome.
What?
One last question.
Okay.
Is Ryan your favorite team member? What's the biggest challenges you face with automation?
Ryan's my favorite team member. Yes. What's the biggest issue we face with automation? That is when we test automation and we put it into production, and for some reason it doesn't work as expected, because then we're screwed. And then we need to back up as soon as possible and reinstate the old way of doing things and go back and reiterate and whatever, with those. And automation is many things. It can be pretty simple things like if this then that. It can be algorithms, right? It can be AI neural networks. It can be, there's a huge list of different tools for automation. When we implement them, we test, and sometimes it's like, hey, models have no arms. What's going on? Mm-hmm. We need to do something. Not that bad, right? But that is that's actually the biggest problem. And then our expense to Amazon Web Services is something I'm not too fond of. Running a lot of automation and a lot of AI tools just take a ton of data and data sets. That you can't do AI without data sets. And when you're training AI based on a couple of million different data sets, that takes up quite a bit of bandwidth and quite a bit of ABS is a big thing with us.
Well, our boss is going to come over here, and we're going to be in trouble if we don't wrap this up.
Good.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, let me grab that clicker.
Give me that.